My brother framing of sexual assault 8 years ago. Now the truth comes out. How do I proceed? All right, here's a bit more about me. I'm a 39-year-old guy and the younger of two brothers. My brother Henry, who's 41, always seemed to be the favorite child in our family. Growing up, it felt like he could do no wrong. Even when he got poor grades, which happened quite a bit, our parents wouldn't get mad. Instead, they'd encourage him, sit down with him, and try to help him improve. They always had a positive spin for Henry's setbacks. On the other hand, when I brought home my report card, even if the grades were pretty decent, the response I got was usually, "I'm so disappointed." It was as if they expected more from me and were never quite satisfied. Then, when it came time for high school graduation, the difference in how we were treated was really obvious. Henry got a shiny new car and a huge party with all our relatives and his friends. For me, the celebration was much more low-key, just $500 and a pat on the back. Although Henry was not a bad guy or a mean brother by any means, we just never really bonded deeply. We each had our own circle of friends and interests, and that suited us fine. I was pretty independent by nature, so I didn't complain much about these things. However, I felt a strong need to get out and forge my own path. That's why after high school, I moved to a different city to attend college. I worked hard over the next few years, focusing on my studies and eventually earning an MBA. After graduation, I landed a job back in our hometown. During my college years and early professional life, I kept in touch with my family mostly through phone calls on birthdays and quick visits during the holidays. It wasn't a deep connection, but we kept up appearances. Meanwhile, Henry struggled academically. He barely made it through high school and eventually dropped out of college. To help him get on his feet, our parents invested some money and helped him set up a small hardware store. I was genuinely happy for him, as it seemed he was finally finding his own way in life. Around the same time, I met Jenny, a wonderful girl from my college city. She was 22 when we met, vibrant and ambitious. We hit it off immediately and started dating. After college, we both moved back to our hometown and decided to live together. Jenny quickly found a job in her field, and we began building our life together. The holidays in 2006 were a special time because that's when I introduced Jenny to my family. To my surprise, they were incredibly warm and welcoming to her, which was a bit of a shock considering how they usually treated me. It felt like, for the first time in many years, I was experiencing a new kind of warmth from my family. However, I noticed Henry seemed particularly interested in Jenny during her introduction. He was looking at her a lot during the gathering. At first, I brushed it off as him just being curious about my partner. But after that holiday, Henry started showing up at our apartment more often than he used to. What started as occasional visits turned into almost daily drop-ins. He would come over in the evenings, exactly when Jenny and I were trying to unwind after a long day's work. This became too much for me, and eventually, I had to set some boundaries. I told Henry that while he was welcome to visit, he needed to reduce the frequency of his visits. This didn't sit well with him, and it sparked a big argument not just between us, but also involving my parents. Eventually, Henry apologized and agreed to limit his visits to once a month, which was a relief. He still made small talk with Jenny during his visits, but it never went beyond friendly chatter. Things continued this way until 2009 when I decided to propose to Jenny. We held a small engagement party, and while my parents were thrilled, Henry's reaction was subdued. He just shook my hand, offered a quick congratulations, and left the party early. That reaction was puzzling and a bit hurtful, but I didn't dwell on it too much. After our engagement, I saw less of Henry, which was okay by me. Jenny and I got married in 2010, and it was a wonderful celebration. Henry brought a date he introduced as Kate, and I hoped that meant he was moving on from any past issues and focusing on his new relationship. They moved quickly and got married just 9 months later. Meanwhile, Jenny and I were enjoying our married life and welcomed our first daughter, Alice, in 2011 and our second, Sarah, in 2013. Life seemed to be settling into a pleasant rhythm for all of us. However, my brother's marriage did not progress as they had hoped, and they separated in 2012. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, Kate messaged me that Henry was obsessed with Jenny, and that was the biggest reason for their separation. I apologized to her and wished her the best. I also called Jenny and asked her about her interactions with Kate, and she told me that Kate was always a bit cold and distant towards her from the get-go. I decided to confront my brother in front of my family and asked him why he is destroying his life because of his obsession with my wife. He was blindsided with that question, denied everything. We had a massive argument that it basically ended with me forgiving my brother and telling him that he is no longer welcome in my house. Both my parents and Jenny talked to me and convinced me that no matter what, he was still family. So for everyone's sake, I decided to be amicable. It was then that it felt like he was genuinely working on himself and we went on with our lives. Fast forward to 2015. I can still recall that day vividly. It was the 25th of July, and I was running multiple errands. My wife took both of our kids to see their grandparents. It was sometime after lunch that I get a call from my father telling me to come to their home and had a lot of anger in his tone. As soon as I entered, I noticed a lot of tension in the air. My wife was a crying mess, and my parents were trying to console her. Some of my extended family members were there as well. I asked what happened, only to be hit by being called the same person word. Not going to say that to avoid Reddit's wrath from my parents. I was shocked and confused. They claimed that a party I went to a couple of weeks back, I had essayed a girl and then texted her to not tell anyone about it. Otherwise, there will be consequences. I had known this girl Amanda for some time. We went to high school together, and she was part of a larger group's friend that I occasionally hung out with as per her. After the party, which was at a club, I followed her to her car and did it there. She shared her screenshots of the alleged conversation with my wife and told her this entire tale. My father slapped me hard, and my parents told me that they never want to see my face again. Jenny was angry, and she said that we're done. I tried to convince them all that I never did that, but it fell on deaf ears. I was basically kicked out of their house and told that neither Jenny nor the kids would be returning, and my father would be coming over to take their stuff to my apartment. When my father came, I begged and pleaded, but he basically packed a couple of bags and told me never to contact them again, and that he would personally hand me to the cops if that happened. By evening, Henry had shared the screenshots and all the details to our extended family group on WhatsApp, from where I had unanimously been kicked out of the next few days. I even had people from my friend group calling me to say that they were disgusted with me and to never contact them again. I was a mess during that time. A kidney. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even properly work. My boss also heard the rumors going around, but couldn't do much until he saw some police action against me. He advised me that I leave the organization on my own to keep my record intact, and that he would ensure that I don't even have to serve my notice. Period. I tried to argue the case, but he told me that if the cops come knocking on my door, he would be kicked out anyway. And in such a scenario, the gravity of the case meant I won't get severance, and my record will be tarnished. I grudgingly agreed to his ask, and I left the organization in the next few days, in mid-August, while I was still wallowing in my misery. I received 2 documents from the court. One was a letter of discernment, and the other were divorce papers. I was quite drunk, but I went to my parents' place anyway, only for my brother to come and beat me up and tell me that I was a disgrace to the family, and it was good that I was disowned. I had blood coming out of my face by the time he was done with me and barely able to stand. My parents and my wife looked at me from afar but did nothing. I managed to get myself up after some time, a crying mess, and realized that I'd lost everything, and everyone that I knew has stayed holed up in my apartment for the duration of the divorce. It went as amicably as it could, as I was jobless. Plus, my now ex-parents stated they would pay for the child. I didn't have to pay child support or any alimony by January 2016. I was divorced, but trying to pick up the pieces of what was once my life was very difficult. During this time, I also felt like confronting Amanda. But the more that I thought about it, the more I realized that could have made matters worse for me. Due to the women-centric laws in my country, I met one phone call, and I would be looking at 5 to 6 years in jail. In February 2016, I got into a major accident and spent a good part of 5 weeks in recovery. The staff told me that they had contacted my emergency number, which was still Jenny at that point, and she hung up and no one showed. Once I recovered, I realized that I'd sped through a good part of my savings, and I needed to get back on my feet, if not for anything else, to have a roof over my head. However, I realized that I won't be able to do anything in the place I was at. So I sold all my furniture, paid my remaining dues for the rented accommodation, and decided to start from scratch in a different place. I moved to a city 2 hours away and tried to get a job for some time, but to no avail. I used to drink myself silly, and thoughts of offing myself were occurring. Waking after seeing a nightmare to cold sweat almost became a norm. For 4 months this went by, after which I ran into an old acquaintance, James, from college. He was the quiet kid during that time and didn't really talk to anyone. But seeing him after so many years was odd, as he spotted me out from the crowd and called my name. We greeted each other and talked about our lives for a bit. I told him I was in the city looking for a job. He told me he had just quit and was planning on setting up a management consulting firm of his own. He then invited me to a drink later on after a lot of talking about our professional lives. He offered me an opportunity to work with him, as he needed a couple of people who knew their stuff. At this point, I thought I needed to work my ass off to get my mind off these thoughts, so I agreed. But I told him I wanted to meet with him and his team and talk to them before we move forward. 2 days later, he introduced me to another guy, Derek, and told me that currently it will be just the three of us going forward. I shook hands with Derek and told them that before they proceeded further, I had something to say. He then proceeded to spill the beans on everything that had happened to me during that time, and how I was disowned and divorced because of it, with the tears coming through. In between, James and Derek told me that they felt sorry for me, but also told me that if there was no criminal record on my person, then there would be no issue. I stated that police never came to my house, and they were relieved. James did mention that to be on the safer side, he was going to ask someone to run a full background check, and I understood his position and agreed. During this time, I was living in a rundown place that I rented to minimize my expenses. I waited patiently for 2 weeks, but was still looking for jobs in other places in case things didn't work out. 2 weeks later, James called me, and we met up later that day. He stated that my record is clean of any essay and welcomed me to the team. After that, I threw myself to my work and started therapy sessions on the advice of Derek. I also joined a gym and vented a lot of my frustration on the punching bag and went from an average of 7 EKGs to above 90 EKGs. Derek and I became Jim Burrows, and I basically looked at him as an older brother, as he was essentially Henry's age. By the end of 2018, I had a good amount of control back in my life. The consulting firm took off and money rolled in. I rented out a nice apartment in a decent neighborhood. The Band-Aid also came off to the extent, and I realized they needed to do some necessary steps to move on. I went to a courthouse and changed my last name officially on record. I adopted the last name of Derek after his and parents go ahead. They saw me as a nice guy and involved me in a lot of their family functions, including me being the best man for Derek's wedding. So this was a way of thanking them as well. I tried dating a bit, but it never worked out for me due to my emotional issues. Till I started dating Kim, 28 in 2019, she was half Korean and half Italian. I met her at a coffee place where I picked up my coffee and on occasion sat there. She used to work behind the counter. We saw each other only for the order. But once when Derek and I were there, he noticed that she was constantly looking at me. He told me that I should ask her out. I approached a bit hesitant and asked her out for drinks later that day. We had a nice date and she said that she had hoped that we could see each other again. I knew that this was going to go in a similar way that my other dates went, which was basically I told them about my past and they ran off and I never blamed any of them. However, the second time I took him for lunch, I decided to tell her before she moved ahead. I wanted to let her know of my past so that she could make an informed choice. It was like she was blindsided. I told her that I never had and never could think about doing that to anyone, and I am still struggling to move on from the aftermath, and that she needs to know what she's getting into before she could even think of going for any further dates. A couple of days later, I get a call from Kim, and she told me that she wants to meet up. We met at the same coffee place where she worked, and she told me that she trusts me and said that she wants to give it a shot. At this point, I was skeptical and even cried a bit, because I couldn't believe that I could even find a bit of normalcy restored in my life. We went out for a few days and really enjoyed each other's company, and it felt like I was finally able to start healing when on my first vacation after years with her to Europe, and had a great time overall. When the COVID-19 virus hit in 2020, we remained in contact throughout over the phone and FaceTime when things regained some level of normalcy in the latter half. She asked if she could move in with me, and I agreed. She was let go from her coffee shop and was trying to look for another job. She was an amazing Kirk, and that's when I suggested that maybe she can try and set up a place and get into the food business. By mid-2021, and with the financial backing of her parents, she had a cloud kitchen set up which basically delivered food to nearby areas. Both of her lives were doing great. I still had a lot of emotional issues, though I no longer had thoughts of offing myself, but the nightmares still continued occasionally. Kim announced in February 2023 that she was pregnant, and a range of emotions came over me from being overjoyed to starting all over again, to crying out of loss of what I once had. I was all over the place. Kim comforted me and we fell asleep in each other's arms. A couple of days later, I proposed to her, and she was overjoyed. It felt like everything was finally moving to a point where I can have some semblance of peace with my life. We were set to be married, and all the preparations were in full swing for my wedding in mid-June this year. I'm sorry for the long post, but I needed to put all the information possible for you to know what a roller coaster things have been for me. At the end of May, I get a call from an unknown number. When I picked up, I could hear someone cry. She said, "Hi, it's Amanda." I instantly recognized that voice and cut the call, trying to hold back my anger. Kim was with me and saw my face and came over concerned. I was trying to hold back my mix of tears and anger and told her who it was. When the call came in again this time, Kim picked up the phone and put it on speaker. There was a guy on the other side, and he explained that it was Amanda's fiancé, and she wanted to come clean over what she said back then. She got on the phone and kept apologizing over and over and kept crying continuously. Kim did most of the talking as I became a sobbing mess, not sure what I wanted to do, so Kim said that they will call back. She immediately called Derek over, who listened to everything patiently as Kim explained what had happened. He gave me a hug and advice that we should set up a meeting at a lawyer's office with her confession so that it could help out in case of any future possible issues. I called up my lawyer and explained everything to him. He said he'll set up a meeting in his office and gave me a time and date. I called Amanda and told her that she needs to come over to my lawyer's office and we'll discuss it there. 3 days later, we met up at his office. Amanda looked half dead with her expressions. Her fiancé was the only person who was with her. My lawyer set up the meeting with a camera to record the entire meeting. I asked him to mediate and I asked him to come with me. We sat across the room and she started to explain in detail what had happened back then. A lot of things were said and discussed, but here's the crew of it. She and my brother were dating back in 2015, but no one knew he was the person behind the entire essay plan. She went along because she really loved him and would do anything for him. He got a new phone and stole my profile pic from my WhatsApp app number back then, and they used it to fake the screenshots by chatting back and forth with Amanda. I went from crying to filled with rage. I can honestly say that if it wasn't for Kim, I might have been charged with assault. Kim was pretty furious and worked up as well, partially due to the pregnancy, and she tore Amanda a new one with her verbal lashes. Though my lawyer tried to maintain things civil, it was pretty clear that Kim was pretty pissed off. She went further to tell her fiancé, if he still marries this human garbage, then he deserves what's coming to him. Fighting back anger and tears, I asked them, why are they coming out and telling it to me now? Her fiancé, Mark, came forward and explained. He said that they were pretty drunk a couple of weeks back and she blurted out how she helped an ex destroy a marriage that stuck with him. And after asking nonstop and pushing her, she finally came clean to him. It was then that he pushed her to own up to her mistakes, if she wants a peace in her life. Apparently, after she helped Henry, he started becoming cold and distant with her and eventually broke off 6 months later. At that point, she felt terrible, but was too scared to come clean and spent a lot of time in therapy trying to work through her issues. After everything was laid out on the table, my lawyer stepped in and said, let's take a 30-minute break and meet back again. Amanda Mark stepped out and her lawyer discussed that, if I want, he can go after her and my brother for defamation. The evidence available is more than enough for me to do what I want. I was feeling a lot of rage, but I decided I didn't want this to spoil the wedding, and whatever I wanted to do would have to wait until after everything was done. I told Amanda that I will be in contact with her, but for now, I don't want her telling anyone else. I didn't want any drama from my ex-family to impact my wedding. After that meeting, Kim hugged me and told me that she was right and trusting her guts. And now she feels like a weight has been lifted off of her shoulders. I shared her sentiment. We had a small wedding with both James and Derek being the best man and a 3-week-long honeymoon covering Europe. It was an amazing time for us both. Thankfully, I was able to work through what I had heard, and Derek too suggested that I should put this on the back of my mind. It didn't spoil the honeymoon too much, though. The nightmares were coming in more frequently than before during that time, and Kim was always there to support me. I always had a discussion with my therapist, who he told me that I will need to confront my ex-family sooner or later, if not anything else, then for closure. After thinking a lot about what had happened, I decided to reach out to Amanda in July and told her what she needed to do. I told her that I will be taking legal action based on her statement, but if she wants to not be screwed financially, she needed to follow what I told her next. She needed to talk to Jenny alone and explain to her everything she told us back in the lawyer's office. She was crying through while listening to me and told me that Mark left her. I told her that I wish I could feel sorry for her, but I don't. Then stated, the karma hits everyone hard. It hit her, and now it's coming from my brother. A couple of days later, I received a text that was from Jenny, in spite of being blocked. I had been sending her birthday wishes and wishes on both of her daughter's birthday, as well as holiday greetings over text. This was the first message that I received in 8 years. She basically asked if we could talk. I didn't want to be alone when I was having this conversation, so I told her I will call her in a few hours. I reached home and was with Kim when the call took place. I could immediately hear Jenny sobbing uncontrollably for a while before she told me how sorry she was and how terrible she is feeling currently. I was somehow able to maintain my composure all this time. I told her that it hurt terribly, knowing that she thought so little of me. but she so easily fell into Henry's trap. I asked her about my girls, and they said they're doing well. I then asked, when did she meet Amanda? She said that she met her 2 days ago. It took a lot of time to process how wrong she was, and quickly she moved away from me. She immediately brought it to my attention that my parents and they were just as stunned. They all wanted to contact me, but she said that she wants to connect first and apologize. I told her what she had done was beyond hurtful. I asked what had happened to the golden child, and she stated that he's been kicked out of the house. I chuckled a bit. She told me that she had married Henry a year after the divorce was finalized, as he was the one who supported her through this, and suddenly it all made sense. Looks like he never got over her. She told me that she has a daughter with him too. After the discussions, I basically told her what is going to happen and a detail of what I wanted. I want her to reach out to all of my former extended families so that they are aware of what a power he is. Secondly, I'm only looking to co-parent only my 2 girls, and that I do not have any intention to reconcile with her beyond what it takes to me having a relationship with my daughters. And third, I will text her the date and time when I want to meet my ex-parents, and I want to meet them in person. After that, I just hug him knowing she was pregnant and her mood would have been all over the place. I kept my emotions in check, but I guess she was crying for the both of us, and we fell asleep on the bed. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was shut off, and when I put it on charge and noticed the barrage of messages that were coming through, I had over 50 missed calls and hundreds of messages. I was also added to the family group message where every single one of them were apologizing. Over the next few days, I started getting messages from some of the friends who were apologizing for what had happened and how they jumped the gun on everything. The only reply I gave was to the family group that since I was disowned almost 8 years ago, that I was an outsider in this group and wished to remain so. Whether I forgive them or not would happen on my terms and my timeline and not theirs. I further told them not to add me back here and left the group. Some of the family members tried to call me out by messaging me that they were disappointed in my reaction, and I shut them down, saying they were not in a position to judge me after being so quick to assume what I did and to not contact me again unless I contact them first. A couple of weeks later, I called up Jenny and told her that I want her to bring my girls over the next weekend so I could meet them properly. Kim, being as adamant and feisty as she is, said that she wants to meet her stepdaughters as well. We argued a lot. It was mostly me telling her that since she was pregnant, she needs to take care of herself. But the Asian in her was pretty adamant, so I gave in. We met at a public park. Jenny looked a bit disabled, but looked like she put an effort to look as good as possible in this meeting. There I saw Alice and Sarah for the first time in 8 years. They had grown so much. The only memories I had of them were in my phone as I was pretty blocked from all the socials and everywhere else. Jenny came crying, trying to hug me, and I put both of my hands up to decline. I've been introduced her to Kim as my wife, and she broke down a sobbing mess in the park. Kim came forward to comfort her, and we sat down in a place close by. I grabbed both my girls and cried out. My girls were never told about me until recently, and they were pretty conflicted, as they only knew Henry as their father. But seeing me suddenly brought out some emotions. There was a lot of crying and talking, and by the evening we exchanged what had happened in our lives. She told me that she got married to Henry a year after that. He took care of her for the first few years. After that, things settled down. He still can grow his landscaping business to a point where it's profitable. And then COVID basically forced him to shut shop. His parents were now dipping into their savings in an attempt to make ends meet, and he never bothered to start something again, despite his parents telling him to. She said that she's filing for divorce from Henry and she can't stand the sight of him. I told her she's free to do what she wants, and it has nothing to do with me. I told her some details moving forward. He essentially wanted Alice and Sarah to attend family therapy sessions with me over going forward so that we can heal. They've been robbed of their real father, and it was time to make it right. And I want to be part of their lives. I also wanted them to be with me and Kim over the weekends, but I told her that that would have to wait, as we had a kid of her own coming. And I want to put my full energy into that for now. Lastly, she said that my parents wanted to reach out to me. I corrected her and said that they were anything but my parents. I still had the letter of disablement they sent out along with the divorce papers, and I had nothing to do with them. But both her and Kim stated that it would help me get closure from them, so I agreed. I told her that I would tell her when I want to meet with them and where I wanted to meet with them. I booked her a hotel and told her that I want her to be in the city for the night, and I want some more time with my girls, with tomorrow being Sunday. We spent that Sunday together as well, but this time I took them to the sites around the city, and we really enjoyed the time that we had before leaving. Both of them gave me a warm hug, and I told them that I would see them next week. I told her that she doesn't need to drive the girls for the family therapy sessions, and I will come over to them. I got a good recommendation from my therapist for that city, and we had a good first introductory sessions. But the therapist spelled it out that sooner or later, they will need to know what my ex-brother did, and I told her they will in due time. She suggested that I write it out here and get a few outside perspectives into my situation as well. I can honestly say if it wasn't for Derek pushing me, I might not have made it to the point that I have. Which is what brings me to opening this forum to you. What should I do from here? I plan to confront my ex-parents sooner or later, and despite of me calling them their ex, I still have emotions and feelings for them. I'm not sure if that makes sense. How do I deal with Henry? I don't think I ever want to see his face ever again. But do I go after him and ruin him with a defamation suit, knowing full well that he has a daughter from my ex as well? And anything I do to her might impact her? If you have any questions, I will try to answer those.